And the title of the presentation is Fire Safety, Why Fire Systems Should Be a Priority. I'll tell you that in the 5 years that we've been doing this seminar, I've been wanting very much to do a fire safety. I think it's a completely overlooked and under-considered system on the boats. It's critically important. It's one of those things, as the folks in Paris could tell you right now, you don't think about it until you really, really need it. Rob's got quite a lot of experience. He's been involved in the marine industry his entire life. He's an expert and leader in our industry for maritime fire and safety. Rob began his fire career in Connecticut as a firefighter. Moved down to South Florida in 2002, combined his fondness of the maritime world and his knowledge of fire safety, and after a decade of experience in the marine fire and safety industry, Rob founded Firewater Marine Services along with partners Jennifer Jeruska and Sandy Handrahan of Yacht Products. Rob's bio is in your programs. It's lengthy. It's solid. Rob is an expert. He's here to tell us about fire safety. Come on up, Rob.
Okay, I'd like to start out by thanking the IYBA for having me here today and all of you for giving me the opportunity to speak in front of you. Fire safety is an issue that a lot of us have questions about, and there's all different parts to it that are very important. Today, I'd like to give you some insight into my part of keeping you all safe. Fire systems and the equipment on vessels and the other components on board should be viewed as a priority. And over history, unfortunately, they haven't been. A lot of the fire system changes or code changes or even inceptions of code were based upon the, unfortunately, disasters at sea. And Paul spoke about Notre Dame today, and actually yesterday, 107 years ago, was the sinking of the RMS Titanic. So the RMS Titanic was set the precedence for what we use today as SOLAS, or the FSS. And it's the basis for all of our code. It's the basis for what now the IMO is set as precedents. And all the classifications and so on, which I'll get into further as I go along. I'll try to explain a little bit of each of them. With the limited time, I'll do the best I can, and of course, you guys can ask me any questions that you'd like. Whoops, wrong one, sorry. We'll go forward a little bit. Today, I'll be speaking about fire systems types. I'll also talk about types of fires, how they interlink with each other, and some of the things that the types of systems are used for and the changes over the years. I'll give you the upkeep on the system, how important they are, how important it is to upkeep, what will happen if you don't upkeep them. I'll also speak about the rules and regulations as much as I can. There are so many and they cross-reference each other, and Malcolm and other people will tell you that, one says one thing, one says the other. And you just kind of have to pick what's the most stringent and live with that. And that can be a hard sell at times for you guys. But if you follow that across the board, you'll be better off. And then the last thing will be the dangers of improper service and training. So we'll start with clean agents. We'll start with ABC fires. Do you guys know that there are 3 parts of every fire? How many of you know that? Okay, there's a triangle, the fire triangle. You need heat, fuel, and oxygen. So ABC fires, ND now, are the fuel. There's always going to be oxygen, there's always going to be heat. So a Class A fire would be a fire that leaves ash, paper, wood, trash, fabrics. A Class B fire would be flammable liquids, anything that's flammable, diesel fuel, oil. The worst one, as a matter of fact, is the lantern fuel that they carry on board. It's probably one of the most dangerous substances that they carry on board, and they put it in holds near sun decks or in the Portuguese locker, and it's probably the most dangerous flammable liquid on board. Class C fires are electrical fires. And then there's another one called Class D. Now in today's day and age, as boats are getting bigger and bigger and people want to have more toys, they have shadow vessels now. The Axis you see in Advantage and boats like that. And these boats carry submarines and airplanes and stuff like that. And Class D fires are metal fires. So when you have a lithium bank of batteries on a vessel, and you have CO2 and halon and so on, and a number of these other clean agents, they're not going to put out a metal fire. If you've ever seen on YouTube or anywhere of a metal fire at a like waste management per se, you can't put them out without a Class D fire extinguisher. So when you guys are going on selling vessels or inspecting vessels, that needs to be a kind of an added thing to the ABC fire from now on. So going forward, halon was established by the United States federal government, actually the Department of the Army, and DuPont in 1954. And halon was used all the way up until 1985 when they found that the ozone layer had a big hole in it. In 1987, they established the Montreal Protocol that would eliminate one of the gases that was probably the most efficient gas made at that time, still is today. It just ruins the ozone. The protocol states a bunch of different things, but in Europe, it's pretty much outlawed as well in Australia. But in the United States, it's still used on a recycled format. So when you guys see halon on boats and people say, oh, well, it needs to be removed, it eventually will. And it'll be more so when we run out of it. But as long as the federal government continues to use it on warships, I don't see it being going away anytime soon. There are protocols that say it has to go away in a certain period of time, like the Montreal Protocol. But until the United States follows suit with the rest of the world, it's going to be around for a little while. When the Montreal Protocol was enforced, manufacturers of these different chemicals, you have FM200, HFC 125, FE13, and then the newest one, Novec. These three on the right are HFC, obviously, hydrofluorocarbons, and they're not ozone depleting gases. However, they're not green gases either. So they still have emissions issues. So when the creation of Novec came along, they decided that if you read the new, like the Kyoto Protocol states, which some countries are part of it and some are not, states that those three gases will eventually be eliminated, as was halon. In doing that, Novec 1230, which is a ketone-based gas, which a lot of the things that we use today, and even sugars that we use in some of our foods, and acetone that we use for our hands when we paint, are ketone-based. So Novec kind of follows those. These gases, as replacements for halon, fight ABC fires, and they do it by suppressing the heat side of the fire triangle to get rid of the heat. They ultimately freeze the fire. The next one would be inert gases, which a lot of the larger vessels will have this. CO2. There are systems that are made with nitrogen and argon that are called argonite. These systems can be further away. So I'll go back a little bit, just say that the clean agent gases can be either within the engine room or within 15 feet of the engine room. These gases, inert gases, high pressure, can be on the aft deck, usually on the aft deck behind the forward crash bulkhead in its own room, but a good distance away from the engine room because it can make it there. It has the pressure at 300 bar. Of these gases, the most prevalent one is CO2. The IMO, the International Maritime Organization, states that CO2 can be used in any of the engine holds or machinery spaces. The problem there is that CO2 is very dangerous. The actual number of people that have been killed since in the time between 1975 and 2000 was over 100 people and 145 injuries, which we don't hear about very much. To combat that, Ansel created Energen on the board there, and Energen is a mixture of nitrogen, argon, and CO2. It's the only gas on the market today that I could stand in this room, all of us could sit in here, and there could be a fire, and it could go off, and we could all just stand here and be fine. It would put the fire out. The mixture of the 8% CO2 that's in the mixture allows it for us to breathe. that allows our body to make it into oxygen. So it's the only one out there that does that today. So in my experience, in what I do, and as I'm here to tell you, I would think that even as expensive as Energen is, in these large super yachts and mega yachts, now that they have another alternative to a high fog or water mist system that can be used, that's just as safe as the two of them. Granted, if you look at this ship here, there's probably 100 cylinders there, so you run into a space issue. With the alternatives to inert gas and to clean agents would be a mare off or some sort of high fog or water mist system, which can be hidden in the bilge or wherever, have its own closet. It follows certain rules, but, not as stringent as CO2 or clean agents. So the part of this that I think everybody the most important is the importance of the upkeep of these systems. Neglect of these systems leads to disaster. There's no two ways about it. I've gone on boats in my entire career and followed people and found that systems were locked out, or that systems weren't hooked back up correctly, or that the hose from the discharge nozzle is running back upon itself, so it had never fired. You see it constantly. Unfortunately, my part of our industry is very unregulated. Even with all the codes we follow and all the things that we're supposed to do, it would take somebody that's more worried about, I'm not saying that not everybody is, but you have to be able to go in there and realize that when I leave, you all are still there. So it's my job to make sure that you're all safe. So that being said, the next one is the system, the right one for my vessel. These few questions here are the ones that I'm asked quite a bit. I just wanted you guys to see it. Is it right for your vessel? It just depends. Is it right for your vessel? More than likely it is, because it's been put in by the manufacturer. But if it's never been serviced, or it's the wrong agent, or in the wrong place, or so on and so forth, it may change that. Will I be safe at sea? Well, you'll be safe at sea if you didn't neglect your fire system. I mean, the fire system should be a priority. All the systems on the boat and everyone that we've talked about today are very important. But if you don't take care of the fire system, the bottom line is that none of the other systems will be able to do anything about it. If you have a fire on board a vessel and it's rough seas and you set the system off and it doesn't work and it's a fiberglass vessel, good luck making it to the life raft and or getting the fire pump to work in time to put the fire out. Just the bottom line is it's not always going to be smooth sailing. The next one is, will insurance cover in an accident? No. If you do not maintain your fire system, if your clients don't maintain their fire system, if boats that you're buying or selling don't have a maintained fire system, and there's an accident, the insurance company will not take care of it. And in fires today, over 50% of them are caused by electrical fires. 50%, breaking it down, 35% are DC fires, which are majority of that power, is in the engine room. So there's a lot of things that can burn. And the other 15% are the AC fires. 5% of fires on boats are caused by leaking fuel or some other form of flammable liquid. And the last one would be 20% of them are caused by, and I've seen this time and time again, where I've gone into a boat that a fire system has gone off, and someone had come in before me and worked there, or done some work on it and left a blanket on top of the exhaust, or left a blanket on top of the turbo, and left and took all their stuff with them. And the vessel goes out to sea and goes fishing, and all of a sudden the fire system goes off, puts the fire out, only to find out that the other 20% of it is the heat caused by the parts in the engine room. In contact with these parts cause fires. And then the most interesting part of it all, and I've told a few of you already, was the other 25% of fires on vessels happen from somebody else's vessel. The one that's sitting next to you, or the dock, the shore power goes, or whatever it may be. It's something else besides your vessel. So if you do your due diligence and you have your system kept up and you don't have any, chance for disaster, then all these questions here are going to be a yes. You're going to have your insurance ability to be paid even if somebody else's boat burns you down. All these things will be taken care of for you. So the next one. So now rules and regulations. All of you have heard of these. at one time or another and either follow them or have to have mandates by them. Each of them have their own code. Obviously, the IMO is the governing body from SOLAS, but IMO was only established in the 1960s. The third protocol or agreement for SOLAS was in 1960 was the first major change for the IMO organization. Prior to that, in 1912, with the sinking of the Titanic, in 1914, they established SOLAS. After that, it stayed in effect not until, it didn't come into effect till after World War II, World War I, excuse me. So even at 1914, they had this safety, they had FSS and the, SOLAS, so that you would be able to survive at sea and be safe. But it didn't come into effect until a second tragedy, and that was the Morro Castle in 1934. When the Morro Castle sank, which was a vessel that would go from Cuba to Florida, and when that sank and I think 159 people died, then the laws got revised again. So SOLAS and the FSS became even more stringent. So it stayed like that for a while. And then the fire safety code, or the fire safety code, didn't change again until 1990. And in 1990, the Scandinavian Star, I don't know if you guys remember this, it was an old casino boat that went between St. Petersburg and the islands in the Bahamas, and it went to Norway. And the crew was all Portuguese, and nobody could speak Dutch, and no one could communicate with each other. And they had taken an old casino vessel and turned it into a ferry boat, pretty much, per se, for overnight trips. And the fire broke out. The crew had 10 days training, which will get me to my next slide. But the crew had 10 days training on that vessel. And the surveyor, who did the inspection, and the fire marshal said that boat would have needed at least 6 weeks training for all of its crew. And within 10 days turnaround time, they changed crew and started shipping people around Norway. Ultimately, what happened is the boat itself had a good fire suppression system, but they had left doors propped open, and the laminate that they used was asbestos-based. So when the fire hits asbestos-based, it turns into cyanide. So not only the people were hiding because the crew at that time decided to leave the vessel. They were done. They didn't know the vessel. They had no idea how to get to passengers and dead-ended passageways and stuff. So they just got in their lifeboat and left. They said that they found people in closets and they found people in bed because that's what the crew told them to do. They gave them no warning. And it went 3 decks by the time they got to the fire and started to put it out. But I think 60 some odd people of over 200 people survived that fire. But these are the things that are mandate code. These are the things that, unfortunately, it takes a disaster for the fire code to be changed to be better. And even today, it's 2012 was the last amendment to the FSS that kind of separated it from SOLAS. It's still Chapter 2 of SOLAS, but it has its own, it's such a large code now. It's 15 chapters, and we all have to follow it when it comes to fire systems and fire safety on board. The ABS and Lloyd's are obviously classification companies that allow for more safety at sea. ABYC is for smaller boats, and the classifications for what they choose, and based upon horsepower and size of vessel, what kind of fire extinguishers you have, what kind of fire suppression system you have. Obviously, the U.S. Coast Guard mandates boats in the United States waters, which as of late, from a couple of my friends that run vessels that are Cayman flag, even sitting at 15th Street Fisheries or one of the smaller marinas where the Coast Guard can just walk on board, even though they're really not supposed to, they have every right to when you're not in a marina where you can't get in. But no marina can keep the Coast Guard out either. And then, of course, there's flag state codes, whether it be Jamaican, Marshall Islands, Cayman, obviously. And Cayman made a big change this year. If you guys don't know, it's now called the Red Ensign Code for large yachts. And it changed quite a few things. not really with the fire side, but some of the other modernize these codes where they have, instead of Morse code, they're using other forms of communication. And, the new NIC system is now maybe not that type of system where it's, an internet-based or a cloud-based system is now part of the code. So more and more things are getting a little bit better. Still not great because Malcolm and I had a conversation before that there's a vessel that he inspected 4 years ago, came back 4 years later, and that same vessel that he said needed its fire system repaired for whatever amount of money it was. I think it was about $2,000. Still wasn't repaired 4 years later. So whose responsibility is that? It's really somebody like me. It's my responsibility to make sure that when I'm told to do things, that those things get done, that you don't cut corners. That's what all these regulations and classifications are for. IMO was really established for shipping at sea to sort of people didn't cut corners, so that it was a fair level playing field, that they didn't spend money on other things, so that they didn't take the time to take care of the fire system or other safety needs. And it's getting there, but it's still very unregulated. So fire system training. We've gotten to a good bit of this, but untrained technicians. So my counterparts or people that I've, other companies or people that don't take the time to, I think in my industry and a lot of our industries, we wouldn't be here today if we didn't care about what we did, that it wasn't what we loved to do. If you don't take the time, at least for me, to love what I do, then at the end of the day, when I go home to my family and I haven't done my job correctly, then none of you are safe. And that's not fair, and it's not right. And it's ultimately going to end up to having to have another disaster for code to change and for things to be, legitimized, I guess. Andy and I were talking about one part of inspections that constantly are overlooked. I get called to go to a vessel. Paul calls me, Rob, I want you to come inspect my vessel. Can you do it on Tuesday? I'm not going to be able to be there, though. Yeah, I can do it on Tuesday, Paul, but I'm not going to be able to do the whole test. Well, what do you mean? Well, part of my test is not only to weigh the cylinder, make sure that it's the right size for the engine room, make sure that it's the correct agent, that it's, all the other attributes that it has to follow certain codes, but I also have to have an engine management system. It has to have a shutdown system, especially on these smaller vessels and fishing vessels. If I can't test that, and let's say you just never get back to me, and you're like, oh, it's all right. I just got the sticker, I'm fine, which happens constantly. I know, well, I hope not. But there's a lot of people out there that won't ever take the time to see me or meet me and say, you know what, Rob, it's important for me to do that. And, the biggest thing here is that when you go to do a fire inspection, you have to check all the boxes. You have to make sure that the whole system works. If one part of that system doesn't work, then you might as well, the whole system's not going to work. And that's really it. You have to be able, like everybody else has talked here today, it's what's best for our industry. If you have somebody that's out there that's not doing it, what's best for you or the industry, then why are they doing it? Are they doing it for the money? Are they doing it to be able to say that they do it? I'm not really sure why you would do that. You want to make sure that everything's safe and that everything's the way that it should be, So you need, the only way that I've ever found to alleviate that is to ask questions. So all of you as people that would be my potential customers that say, hey, Rob, I want you to come do a boat, you have to know how it works. You have to be aware of how it works. There's no two ways about it. You can sit there and be like, oh, it's just the fire system. I don't even know where the fire extinguishers are. Jen, my partner, told me she lived on a vessel for 5 years in Spain and never saw a fire inspection done. Didn't know where her fire extinguishers were. Didn't know where the fire system was. So how do you even know if it's going to work? And those are the kind of things. There's so many mandates and so many other things in the marine industry, but not on this. And it's the most important thing. If there's a fire and you're in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and you don't know how to use the system, you don't even know if it's full, you don't know where the fire extinguishers are, you don't know where anything is, there's only one outcome there. You're either going to be lost at sea in your tender if you make it, or you're going to sink with the boat. I don't mean to be negative, but it's just the realization of it. You guys have to realize how important this is. Fire plans. Fire plans are an old fire chief told me in Hartford, Connecticut. I was probably 8 years old. And he said, the only thing worse than having no fire plan is having 2 fire plans. So the bottom line is that you have a fire plan, one fire plan, not a fire plan that Paul liked, not a fire plan that Andy liked in the same boat. You have to have one fire plan, and every part of the crew needs to know that fire plan. Everyone. You know, everybody needs to know how the fire system works. Everybody needs to know where the pole is. Everybody needs to know everything about it, where every fire extinguisher is, what different type of fire extinguisher is used for what, and why. If you go in and you spray ABC chemical in the ECR of a Fed ship, and you ruin everything in the ECR just to put out the computer, the laptop that's sitting on the desk, I don't think they're going to be really happy with you. So if you're properly trained, you'll know, okay, well, there's a CO2 there, which even though they're outside the ECR, they're not supposed to be, which is another code that needs to be changed. And it's in the SOLAS that they shouldn't be there. But every vessel that you go on, they're sitting in the ECR. If you use that fire extinguisher in the ECR with the chief engineer sitting there to put out a fire next to him, he's not going to get up and get out of there. CO2. So you have to make the proper changes. You need to be aware. You need to be trained. You need to understand. You need to, you know, like it says, you have to see something is different. You have to. You know, if a fire should break out on board, there's a clear fire plan. That clear fire plan, you know, your crew knows exactly where they have to go. They know exactly where they need to be. The one guy goes that he can go get the SCBA and his partner, and they keep their time clock, and they do it the right way. They go in and try to fight the fire. At some point, you can't fight the fire anymore. You know how to set the system up. You know? It's just, the bottom line is that for a lot of years and for a lot of reading, and I mean, I'll be as humble as I can be, I thought I knew quite a bit, and then I prepared for this speech. You know? And you realize, wow, I guess I didn't know as much as I thought I did. There's just so many things and so many issues that people don't talk about disasters at sea based upon fire. There's so many. Just take a look. I'll send you links. Send me your email. I'll be more than happy to give you the articles I read. In some aspects, you'll be sick. So, and the last thing, do any of you know what that saying means right there? Can't see it from my house. Anybody? Huh? Well, can't see it. My father had a construction company for 45 years. They built roads and bridges and homes and buildings all over Connecticut and New York City. And his guys used to joke around when I was a little kid, and they'd say, and a lot of people do it, but that's just remembered for me, was, can't see it from my house. And they're usually talking about light switches or studs in the wall that are crooked or things that just, you know, probably have no effect on whether the building's going to stand or fall. That's great in a building like this. But on a boat, if the pull cable's not really in there good, or the system's not really strapped to the wall that well, or the fire extinguishers aren't where they're supposed to be, there is no can't see it from my house, because they're never going to get to your house or their own house for that matter. So I've lived my life a lot in everything that I've done, shoeing horses, playing baseball, being a fire inspector on vessels. You have to do everything the right way the first time. You have to be trained to do everything right the first time. You have to give your knowledge to other people and not be worried that they're going to take it and do it better than you. You hope that they do it better than you. And in this industry, if I can give any of you anything at the end of this, is that the importance of these fire systems, the importance of the rules, the importance of training your people, the differences and all that should be at the forefront. Because without this, and without keeping this up to date, you're not going to have a boat for very long. So, and then that is what's going to happen. Oh, it's not there. But anyway, there's a picture of a boat burning, but it's not there.
You know what's going to happen.
So, but any questions?
Do we have questions? I have a question.
Sure.
And I don't know if you know the answer to this or not, but prior to the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Towers in New York City in 2001, does anybody know what the greatest non-war related, non-natural disaster in the United States for loss of life was? It was a fire aboard a vessel on the on the Hudson River. No, the East River in New York. It was a vessel named the Slocum, and it happened in 1912 or 1914. There was a Sunday church outing from Manhattan up to City Island, and it was a 150, 200-foot long wooden paddle wheeler. And as it traveled up the East River, fire broke out, and it was a church group from a Lutheran church in Manhattan, and nobody knew how to swim. There was no firefighting plan.
Nothing.
It was a wooden vessel.
It was a paddle
and it was
boat,
the greatest. It was a paddle boat. That's right. It was the greatest loss of life in American history, non-military and non-natural disaster related, and it was fire on board a vessel. So, it's serious stuff.
Yeah.
Any questions from the audience on firefighting? Hang on a second, Jeff. Your microphone's right behind you.
Thanks very much. Good brief, Rob. Thank you for that. Two questions for you. One, I probably missed when you said it, but I wanted to go back and talk about FM200 or HFC227.
Okay.
Are those gases, are those clean agents safe to be in the machinery space when they're discharged, or is it like CO2?
Out of all of these here, they say Novec is probably one of the safest. FM200, HFC 125. I've had them go off on me. I was placing a cylinder in a system on a refit, as a matter of fact, and I placed the cylinder, ran the pull cable, hooked up the pull cable, and they pulled the pull cable and went off in my face. So 1,500 cubic foot cylinder, big cylinder. It gets you dizzy, doesn't kill you. The hydrofluorocarbons are made so that they won't do what halon did. And that's not even true either. I digress a little bit. Hey, people think that you can't breathe halon. You can't for a long period of time. But its replacement, Fe241, was twice as caustic as that. So, can you breathe these? Yes. Would I? Not for a long time. Fe13 is another alternative that DuPont's made, which is another clean agent, which isn't used on vessels. It's used in buildings because it's again very expensive. But that has a 50% maturation rate, so you can stand in there when it goes off. I still wouldn't do it. I mean, if they go off by accident, can you get out? Yes. Is it like CO2? You're not getting out. If you're in the corner of the engine room and you kick the CO2 cylinder, even if you hold your breath, it's going to go in your ears. It's going to go in your nose without even breathing. I mean, you can hold your eyes. It'll go in your eyes. They're safer than that. That's a good answer. I mean,
yeah, that does it for me. Thanks very much for that. Sure. And then the follow-on question was a volume comparison. We saw the 100 CO2 bottles. I remember in school that CF2 or CO2 system requires a significant more amount of volume of gas bottles to protect a single space. Do you have any idea if that's like 5-to-1 or 10-to-1? I forget what the ratio is. And then the follow-on to that is, what's the smallest size vessel that you would come across the CO2 system on?
Old Bertrams. Remember when they were outboard of the port engine? You had to climb around or take the floor out. Yeah, remember? Those are probably whatever they were, 46s. 50, yeah. That's probably today's day and age. It probably. I would think that if you have vessels from Europe, Azimuths, Benettis, stuff like that, the smaller vessels, not today, but let's say in the early 2000s, some of them would come with a Centauri Cassiani CO2 system. The ones buried under the stairs. I'm sure everybody knows what those are, and you can't barely get to them. The actual breakdown of how much CO2 you need compares to how much. I can give you this. The vessel Aurora has 3 massive Novec cylinders in the engine room. There's probably, if I had to say, maybe 600, maybe 700 pounds of agent. Aviva, the Aberking, is probably, and let's just say they're both around 20,000 cubic foot, just to give you an idea, has, I think, 15 CO2 cylinders. So that's 100 pounds a piece, or 45 kg, So that's double the amount, almost, I would say. I don't know if it's really 2-to-1, but it's probably pretty close. Yeah, I mean, think about that. The space, the cabinet on all the Aberkings, Atlantis, Aviva, Amaryllis, the cabinet's half, 15 feet long, full of CO2 cylinders. As far as I can't even reach the back cylinders. They're that far away. So,
Excellent. Do we have any other questions? You know, the purpose of this presentation, thank you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Excellent job.
Thank you.
Obviously, the purpose of this was not to turn everybody into firefighters, but you know, it's one of the most unthought about, neglected systems. As Rob said, Malcolm went aboard a boat, wrote up the fire extinguishing system as having needed service. 4 years later, comes back and does the same boat. Lo and behold, the same sticker is on the same fire extinguisher. Nothing's been done. How the insurance company allowed that to happen, we don't know.